When people hear the word habit, they often imagine something big and difficult, like running 5 miles every day, quitting junk food completely, or studying for hours without a break. But the truth is, habits are much smaller than we think, and their power lies in the fact that they don't need to feel overwhelming. A single small change, repeated daily, can completely transform a person's life, and the story of a lazy boy is one of the best examples of this truth. It shows how something as small as folding a blanket, reading a page, or taking a short walk can grow into lasting transformation, shaping character, identity, and future. Let's start with the boy in this story. He is known for being lazy. He sleeps late, wakes up late, avoids schoolwork, and spends more time daydreaming than doing anything productive. To his family and friends, this is just who he is. But laziness is not a permanent label. It's the result of repeated choices. Day after day, the boy chooses comfort over effort, distraction over focus, idleness over activity. Slowly, those small choices harden into habits, and those habits create the image of laziness. From a psychological perspective, his behavior is not fixed. It's simply a collection of routines that his brain has learned to repeat. Habits work through a simple loop. There is a cue, then a routine, and finally a reward. The cue might be boredom, the routine is lying around doing nothing, and the reward is a temporary feeling of comfort. The brain learns to repeat this loop automatically. Over time, it feels like laziness is part of the boy's personality, but in reality, it's just his brain following a script it has memorized. This is important because if a habit can be learned, it can also be unlearned or replaced, and that is where the story begins to shift. One morning, instead of staying in bed, the boy makes a small choice. He folds his blanket. It's such a tiny action that nobody else notices, but it marks the beginning of change. Folding the blanket doesn't make him a scholar or an athlete, but it gives him a small sense of control, a feeling of accomplishment that nudges him in a different direction. The next day, he folds it again. Soon, this small action becomes part of his identity. He starts to feel like someone who takes care of his surroundings, someone who can manage small responsibilities. This is how big transformations start, not with massive leaps, but with little steps that are easy to repeat. Think of habits as compound interest for human behavior. If you improve by just 1% every day, the gains may look invisible at first, but over weeks, months, and years, they add up to extraordinary results. The boy begins with folding his blanket, but soon he adds another small action. He decides to read for 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes doesn't sound like much, but over a year, that adds up to hours and hours of reading. Without ever setting an overwhelming goal, he ends up finishing books that he never thought he could read. Each page builds knowledge, and more importantly, each session reinforces his identity. He no longer tells himself he is lazy. He starts to believe he is someone who learns, someone who grows. That shift in identity is what makes habits stick. From a technical perspective, habits reduce the need for willpower. Willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired after use. If you rely only on motivation and discipline, you will eventually give up. But habits bypass this problem because they run on autopilot. Think of brushing your teeth. You don't need motivation to do it. You just do it because it's automatic. The boy learns to apply this same principle to studying, exercising, and organizing his time. The less he has to think about starting, the easier it becomes to continue. Another important aspect the story highlights is the role of environment. Before he started changing, the boy's environment supported laziness. His books were hidden in drawers, his phone was always nearby, and his bed was the most comfortable place in the house. So the environment made it easier to be lazy than to be productive. But when he rearranges his surroundings, things start to change. He keeps a book on his pillow, so he has to pick it up before sleeping. He leaves his study table clean, so there is no barrier to sitting down. He keeps his phone in another room while he works. These small adjustments are powerful because they reduce friction for good habits and increase friction for bad ones. Behavioral scientists call this choice architecture. The way your environment is designed shapes the choices you make, often without you realizing it. The story also shows the importance of immediate rewards. Our brains are wired to prefer short-term gratification over long-term benefits. That is why laziness feels attractive. It provides instant comfort. Good habits like studying or exercising usually give their benefits later, which makes them harder to stick with. The boy learns to bridge this gap by rewarding himself in the short term. He allows himself to enjoy a small treat after finishing his reading, or listens to his favorite music while exercising. By connecting good habits with immediate rewards, he makes them more enjoyable, which increases the chances of repeating them. Over time, he discovers that habits tied to identity are stronger than those tied only to outcomes. If his only goal was to get good grades, he might get discouraged after a poor test result. But when he focuses on becoming the type of person who studies daily, the results follow naturally. Identity is sticky. Every small habit becomes a vote for the kind of person you want to be. Folding the blanket is a vote for being disciplined. Reading for 10 minutes is a vote for being a learner. Taking a short walk is a vote for being active. Each vote reinforces the story he tells himself about who he is, and over time, his self-image shifts completely. He also uses a technique known as habit stacking. Habit stacking is when you attach a new habit to an existing one, making it easier to remember. The boy already has routines he follows every day, like brushing his teeth, eating meals, and going to bed. By attaching new habits to these anchors, he reduces the effort required to form them. After brushing his teeth in the morning, he reads 1 page. After eating dinner, he takes a 5-minute walk. After folding his blanket, he writes down one small task for the day. By stacking new behaviors onto old ones, he creates a chain of actions that feels natural instead of forced. From a neurological point of view, repetition strengthens the brain's pathways. Each time the boy repeats a habit, neurons in his brain fire together, and over time they wire together. This process, known as myelination, makes the action faster, smoother, and more automatic. At first, even folding the blanket feels like effort, but after weeks of repetition, it becomes second nature. The brain literally rewires itself to support the new habit, proving that laziness is not a permanent condition, but a pattern that can be reshaped. What makes this story so relatable is that almost everyone struggles with laziness or procrastination at some point. The boy's journey shows that you, Don T, need to make dramatic changes to escape it. You just need to start small. The smaller the habit, the easier it is to maintain, and once you start, momentum carries you forward. Action creates motivation more than motivation creates action. The boy doesn't wait to feel inspired to study. He opens the book for just 2 minutes, and once he starts, it's easier to keep going. The influence of people around him also plays a role. When he spends time with friends who are equally lazy, he feels no urgency to change. But when he sees classmates who are focused and hardworking, he feels inspired to match their energy. Human beings are social creatures, and we naturally imitate the habits of those around us. Neuroscience explains this through mirror neurons, which activate in our brains when we observe others doing something, making us more likely to copy them. The boy's progress accelerates when he aligns himself with people who encourage growth rather than laziness. Over weeks and months, the accumulation of these small habits creates visible results. His grades improve, his energy levels rise, his confidence grows, and even his relationships become better. His parents and teachers no longer call him lazy because his actions tell a different story. But none of this happened overnight. It came from the power of starting small, repeating consistently, and letting those habits shape his identity. The surprising thing about small habits is how invisible they feel in the moment. Folding a blanket doesn't feel like self-improvement. Reading a single page doesn't feel like education. Taking a short walk doesn't feel like fitness. But over time, these actions compound, and what once seemed insignificant becomes the foundation for transformation. The lazy boy didn't become disciplined by accident. He became disciplined by letting small habits accumulate until they changed the way he saw himself.